Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. William White, an official scientist of the Midnight Society, has once again found his way into the darkness of the Fox Den for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy. Yet please allow me to feed. Absolutely delicious. And now that Mr. White has released me from my shackles and allowed me to feed, it is once again time to take a walk into the madness known as the Dogman.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, once again you are tuning in to Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. William White, one of the members of the science team for the Midnight Society, has decided once again it is time to sit around the late night fire as we burn the timber into the early hours of the morning in an attempt to figure out what the heck is over in Chernobyl. William, my guy, how you been, bro?
Oh, I've been really good. Life's been treating me well.
Excellent. Did you get smoked with the same snowstorm Jody was complaining about?
No, but I did drive up to the northern side of the state over the weekend, and yeah, once you cross a certain line, there's a lot more snow. Where I'm at, it's cold, but the snow's gone.
All right, that's cool. So Jody's Cincinnati-ish. Where is that? That's more northern, you said?
Jody is, he's more, no, Cincinnati's in the south. Jody's, he's in a town not too far from Cincinnati, a little north of me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the suburbs of Cincinnati.
Gotcha. There we go. I had a little flip-flop right there. Well, sounds like you are avoiding the smoky edge because Jody's, whatever hit him, came up here and gave us a nice little butt cheek whipping too. You got 6 to 9 inches, I believe it was, something along those lines.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, not nice to wake up to and realize, wow. But it is what it is. I mean, it's been pretty mild for the most part for a winter up in New England. Knock on wood, can't really complain. A lot of the snow's been going elsewhere to people that might not really supposed to be getting it, but hey.
It's been a different winter compared to the last several years, so.
Creepy
there you
stuff.
go.
Sure. What else you been up to, man?
Oh, just a little bit of hobby stuff with my son. We 3D print and paint miniatures for a war game, and we, on the weekends sometimes we go off and play at tournaments and stuff. So, been doing that this weekend.
There you go. Excellent. Do you ever watch any sort of werewolf movie with your children or anything, or is that kind of
we watched Werewolf in London with them over Halloween.
Okay. Well, The reason I mentioned that is Tubi. It's a free platform. You got to check out The Wolf of Snow Hollow. It's not even close to as brutal as American Werewolf in London. None of these are. But also Operation Blood Hunt with Quentin Rampage Jackson that just came out.
All right.
And then Late Phases. Those are all actually pretty decent movies. This last one, I don't know, man. I wouldn't show them because it's like a gore fest, but it's a sci-fi movie back when they used to churn these out, but they were actually pretty solid B flicks. It has some decent actors. It's called Dire Wolf, and it's
Oh,
actually
cool.
probably one of the better werewolf movies I've seen in general. But like I said, it's definitely a B flick, but the attack and the costume, the outfit, and the premises is pretty cool. Long story short is they take a primitive dire wolf and then mess around with, you know, how they roll that stuff, and then it escapes from the cryo freeze aspect and just causes mayhem. They actually make a reference in that movie to a supposed real case where a woman claimed her son was feeding this strange Dogman thing outside and kept coming in and getting more food and claiming his friend was hungry. And the mother was like, dude, what the heck, is my kid going insane? Follows him outside and then sees this insane dog thing just taking food from her child. Well, in the movie, they make a hint at that as well, which is pretty cool.
That is cool. Little Easter egg.
Yeah, which means whoever made that movie wasn't just making it straight up the full-fledged, you know, gore fest, that they actually had some sort of interest in something that people like you and I would get the head nod at, you know?
Yep, for sure.
Great stuff. And then besides that, I've been spending a lot of time with our science team, realizing that primates and baboons are really heavily involved in, you know, this whole potential dogman thing. And when you get a chance, my most recent episode where I sat down with Jessica, I explained more or less why they would have adapted such as we did because of the lack of tree use over here in comparison. And I just break it all down. The rest of the science team has also been mentioning, you know, being up in the first couple layers of trees, so nothing too high up, but just anything that like a cougar would do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Teeth chattering or popping, which we think might be one and the same. Quadrupedal, bipedal, that's a primate, posture, motion. Their tracks look similar to how our feet look, except with claws, which is how baboons, you know, and primates look. Their hands and their arms are long, like raccoonish. And if you look at baboons, they have huge claws. And we're not saying it's a baboon, but there's a lot of primate type tendencies that fall into a lot of these sightings. So we've been trying to really dig that up, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw a baboon at the zoo when I was a kid. I was struck by how much its face looked like a dog, you know. So, you know, when I started looking into the Dogman thing, that was one of the first things that clicked in my head was, well, what if it's some sort of a large baboon, you know? Because baboons are not that large, but, you know, if you had some larger prehistoric variant of them, yeah.
Yes, isn't that so creepy, man? I definitely think that a lot of that is mixed in with what we're dealing with here, and some point in the future we should talk a little bit about that as well. I know the rest of the science team would love to kind of get a little mini roundtable going at some point in time. Yes, we are making huge strides in regards of really separating ourselves from the clickbait, but actually showing substantial things that can't be verified or that can be verified, and just approaching things with great angles. Like last night, all right, Josh Gates does a great example. I know some people aren't necessarily the biggest fan of him, think he's just like a host. But either way, he is with his squad. They're looking at the Beast of Bray Road, and a recent gentleman who I reached out to, and he actually responded to me. I would like to talk to him. This is more or less a mini segment of his encounter. He claims around 150 feet in front of him, he saw what everyone says the Beast of Bray Road looks like. That's not really the point of this. The point is that they reenacted the 150 feet with one of their biologists, okay? And as he ran across the road and down the hill, they could actually see, surprisingly, 150 feet. But you couldn't really see much more than basically the outline of his jacket a little bit, and maybe that he had a hat on. They agree that people are probably seeing something, but also it does leave a very large case of misidentification as well. I mean, they literally reenacted it at the same type of scenarios where people see it on Bray Road, and there's not like a lot of lights and such. Pretty interesting, and I just have been really trying to listen, watch a lot of other people and their potential diagnosis and research aspects. Like one woman out there, interesting encounter, she claims it was looking in her window or her daughter's window, which you and I have already talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
Wolves and canines will stand up on two legs and look over things for a second, whether it's foliage or brush at prey. So, yes, it could have stood up on two legs and would have a large head and look in her window. All right. Well, they showed the tracks. This is just me personally, and I've had a chart made, and others with us, and Nuxium, our tracker, and others agree with me. Again, everyone's allowed to make their own opinion. She swears up and down it was a Dogman, but I swear up and down it's a wolf print because it literally fits into the exact diameters of what a normalish or a little bit larger wolf would.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I've mentioned it in some of our previous episodes that for a Dogman to be as big as people say that it is, it would need feet that were actually probably not, let's say a normal large male wolf, timber wolf, gray wolf in Canada might be 150 pounds. So if we're talking about, say, a 450-pound Dogman, we're talking about something that's 3 times as heavy. But it's going to need actually more than 3 times the surface area of its paws, especially when it goes on two paws, to distribute its weight and not sink into soft soil, mud, whatever, excessively. So I would expect a Dogman to have paw prints that were the size of dinner plates.
Mm-hmm.
Not 3 times as big as a wolf, but more like 8 times as big as a wolf. You know what I mean? It wouldn't if they're looking at a print that's a little bit bigger than a large dog or a wolf. Well, I don't think that's a Dogman, but that's my opinion. So
I'm right there with you. It's important though, just for the general audience and everyone in general to understand that though. All right, wolves are big, okay? There are some big domesticated canines.
there are.
But like you just said, for something to consistently or be comfortable bipedally, it has to have, yes, it has to, and I don't even like using those words, feet that are set up like ours or primates, all right? Meaning specifically more or less baboons, okay? If you look at a baboon's foot, it's really creepily a lot like some of these potential Dogman sightings, all right? And now if you're seeing some of them that aren't as healthy and mangy or, maybe not having the proper breeding populations and then deformalities, man, that would be one heck of a freaking nightmare fuel werewolf looking thing for sure, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's the whole zebra versus horse thing. If you're not expecting to see a zebra, it's going to be pretty. If I walked out on my sister's farm a few miles from me here in Southwest Ohio and saw a zebra, that'd be pretty shocking. I'd expect to see a horse because she has horses, but not a zebra, right? So if you go outside and you see some giant mutant baboon type thing, that's going to be pretty stunning because we don't live in Africa. We don't expect to see something like that. So
100%, my friend. No one expects to see that yet. It's here. And before we start diving into Chernobyl, which all ties into the stuff we're touching base on here, what is your thought on why or how the heck that large baboon skull got in Ohio where Jody found it with the bullet hole in the back? I mean, him and I have spoken about it. There really is only a couple of logical thought processes. Most likely it had to have been somebody's pet that they couldn't handle anymore, or could
yeah,
have escaped from somewhere as such. But
couple
where the
things.
heck?
I mean, I actually want to do it someday in my life. People do go to Africa to go on safari hunts, and they will take all sorts of animals. Um, and baboons are one of them. So maybe it was someone's trophy that they brought back from a safari hunt, and somehow maybe their house got robbed, burglarized, and someone stole just whatever they could get their hands on, and then realized they weren't going to be able to sell this baboon head or skull, and ditched it in the river. Maybe that's it. Maybe it was an escaped pet that someone shot because that's weird, and you're out there with a gun and you shoot a weird animal. Or maybe, like you said, maybe someone put down a pet that they couldn't handle any longer. um, those are, I think, probably the most likely options.
I didn't even think about that first one you did. I thought about all the latter ones. So yeah, there we go. All those would be the most logical. But then still not out of the realm of possibility, as it just shows that maybe we do have some sort of active population of baboons that are scarcely holding on around here or something.
I mean, that would be interesting. They're social animals. You know, they run around in troops. So if there was a reproducing population, pretty soon you'd have like, you know, a troop of 20 or 30. They're not exactly quiet or shy, at least not in Africa. They're kind of nuisance animals from what I've seen. But yeah, you know, they're also smart. They're primates, so maybe they learn to adapt. You know, but it's well, I guess there are baboons in South Africa, and I think South Africa gets fairly cold. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they get too much snow. I bet it's not as cold as Ohio. Um, but it is, you know, it is on the southern end of the hemisphere. So they probably can tolerate some degree of cold. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
Got the caves there though too, which is something that Meiku and others have spoken about because the temperatures definitely are
Yeah,
varying.
there you
Yeah.
go. Caves are great for, you know, you get deep enough into a cave, it doesn't matter if it's 3 degrees outside, it's probably 45 or 55 degrees in the cave, you know?
Yes, exactly. Like you and I had spoken about before, technically, that cave in Florida could pop up somewhere in Argentina after traveling down through, underneath the ocean and such.
It's
Super,
possible, yeah.
yes, baffling stuff. It all ties into the adaptation, and Chernobyl is one of those places, whether it was a mistake, which it supposedly was, which is one heck of a mistake,
Big
yet there
giant
was
mistake.
a yeah, massive meltdown, and everyone in the audience should have a general consensus of what Chernobyl is. I will sum it up for you in around 30 seconds, but you can search for it. Huge town, basically, more or less, military type community that this reactor melted. Everyone had to clear out, and when you go in now, there is stuff left everywhere still.
Yeah, it's
Kids'
like a time
toys,
capsule.
yes, books. People, I don't know if I would call them smart or not smart. It's amazing that they're documenting these things, but the radiation is out of control there, and they have to wear special pieces of engineering equipment that tells you legit beep beep you're
Yep.
exposed to this amount of level.
You
And
better get
people
out.
are
You're at your max limit or whatever, yeah.
yeah, and they're going down to the quote unquote elephants for it, right? This is literally the spot of the meltdown. Jeremy Wade, you must have heard of him, River
Yeah, I've
Monsters.
heard of him, yeah.
Love that guy. Huge, awesome fisherman that goes all the way around. Like I said, he's a biologist. Well, he caught a same thing. He was supposedly okay, but he had to watch out for the radiation levels. Caught a Wells catfish there in one
Yeah,
of
yeah, those are
the,
huge.
yes, pools where it would drain into the reactor.
Hmm.
It was a creepy midnight black color. He said it was a little bit smaller than it really should have been for its age, but it had so much radiation in it that he was so confused how it was even functioning still. And that ties into what I wanted to ask you is there's a ton of wildlife. So all
Oh,
these
yeah. Wild
creatures
boar, deer, wolves. I mean, everything you'll find in Europe, really.
and okay, if they're going in there, obviously they're not going to see the direct correlation immediately, but animals can smell when people are sick and things, and also when natural disasters are coming. Would animals really go to a place that is so toxic and not pick up on it?
Well, see, I don't know if you can smell radiation. Um, that may be something that they're just not like adapted to detect because until we started messing with atoms, you know, they're outside of like natural radiation from certain rocks and the sun's radiation. You know, were no intense concentrated forms of radiation on the Earth. So it would make sense that they may just be completely, you know, blind to it and not realize the potential threat, even on an instinctive level. That's what I would think.
Dang. All right. Well, that leads me into my next question then. I don't like to deal in 100s, but it has to be 100 that some sort of issues are going to be occurring in reproduction afterwards.
Definitely.
And all right, and correct me if I'm wrong here. There's a lot of people that think radiation had something to do more or less with how we adapted to, because in certain situations, radiation causes evolutionary aspects. It's really strange, and people also don't realize that radiation can be caused naturally in certain areas, meaning like when you find dinosaur skulls and such at certain points in time, they have to be really careful with that stuff.
Oh yeah,
Because
different rock layers can have, a higher. I mean, uranium comes from the ground. I mean, there's other rocks and minerals that are radioactive as well. I mean, that's why people's basements get tested for radon, which is a gas that'll come out of shale rock, and radon is radioactive and can potentially cause cancer. So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of radioactive things on planet Earth. It's just generally they're not like uranium rock. If I had a piece of uranium ore in my hand, I'd probably be fine and have no effects from it. What we do when we purify it and turn it into uranium that can be used in a nuclear reactor or a nuclear weapon is you essentially are isolating one particular isotope of that uranium, and throwing away or using the remainder of it for other purposes. And so then you just concentrate this one particular variant of that atom, and in that pure form it's much more potent, powerful, and dangerous. So
dang, yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and it's super creepy for sure.
it's scary, man. The radiation is scary to me.
Yes, and it causes, like I said, certain things to grow more. And
Well, what it does is, you'll hear about like gamma particles and beta particles and alpha particles, and so it's essentially throwing off these little, I can't remember if they're neutrons. I think they're neutrons, but it's throwing off these little subatomic particles at high speed all the time in every direction, and those particles have the ability to basically smash into your DNA, your chromosomes and your cells, and snip off portions of your DNA or damage. I don't know if you've ever looked at people. People talk about DNA code, but it's like a bunch of letters, A's and U's and T's, and those all stand for different like amino acids. But imagine that you're supposed to have 3 of those A amino acids in your chain, and one of them gets like knocked off, and now this chromosome just happens to be the one that gets because we're replicating our cells. We're replacing our cells every day. They're splitting and dividing it and recycled, and but now imagine that particular damaged chromosome is the one that gets reproduced, that gets duplicated that particular day, and then so now it's created this copy with an error in it, and then that gets duplicated again and again and again, and pretty soon you have like this tissue that is forming wrong because the DNA code for it got damaged. It's like a computer program where it's like when Windows won't boot up because it was corrupted, right? I've had that happen on my PCs. It's like, error in startup, we detected that your Windows file is corrupted. That's basically what's happening to your DNA when it gets exposed to high levels of radiation. And so generally, because it's chaotic and unpredictable, it just leads to bad things like cancer. But there's always a chance. There's always a chance that it snips off or smashes or alters a strand of DNA that actually is recognizable code by the little protein processors in our body that are what make our cells and tissues and everything. And all of a sudden, you or your descendants, develop a mutation that may actually be useful, or even if it's not useful, something, right, rather than just a lump of cancer cells.
dang, straight up gnarly stuff right there.
Yeah, it's like, imagine it's an invisible shotgun that's like ripping apart your chromosomes. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
On a humorous note, just makes me think maybe there was a little bit of truth in the Ninja Turtles when I was watching it.
Yeah.
I was nerding out watching that the other day, which is why I made that reference, the toxic sludge in New York. Creepy. Well, what do you think is going to be the outcome of this? But before you answer that, here's another really interesting scenario. As of recently, numerous cases of bull sharks have been seen in toxic sludge and polluted water, whether it's ink, all this such, mating and reproducing. there has to be some sort of repercussion coming on here afterwards. And I know the Russian military, again, before you answer the first part, answer this after. If you agree this is a good thing, periodically goes in there and tries to unalive any animals they see out of the reasonings, all that we just spoke of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I get why they would be doing that, because these animals are, even if they're successfully thriving and surviving there in Chernobyl, if they leave that area and then say mate with wolves in Russia or Romania or someplace nearby, they might be corrupting the gene pool of those populations of wolves or wild boar or deer or whatever, right? So I understand why, from a ecological point of view, that might be viewed as a good thing to do. As far as like animals, learning to deal with our pollution and toxins and stuff like that, and thriving in it, I mean, that's just evolution right there, natural evolution. It's called hormesis, basically. Hormesis is where, I mean, when you weightlift, that's a form of hormesis. You're putting your body under stress, under trauma, and then it's sink or swim, and you'll either get stronger or the damage you'll take will never be recovered from. And thankfully, our bodies, at least when we're young and healthy, they get stronger. It's the same for, like, being out in the cold or the heat or whatever. You're either going to handle it and adapt to it. And so these animals that are learning, like coyotes that learn to thrive in our cities, or bull sharks in the Ganges River, one of the most polluted bodies of water in the whole world. If they're thriving, that's because the ones that were susceptible to those poisons and toxins, and pollution, low oxygen levels would be a big problem in heavily polluted water. Those ones failed to reproduce, and then ones that had genes that made them less susceptible and more resistant to that environment, they're the ones who survived, mated, and passed on their DNA. And now the population is more specialized in dealing with those conditions.
Boom. Fire stuff right there. And do you think that is what happened with hyenas, more or less, specifically the spotted hyenas? Because a lot of people don't realize spotted hyenas are immune to rabies, anthrax, and all kinds of other filthy diseases, things that would take
probably, because hyenas, they're predators, but they're also scavengers, right?
Yes.
And so, if say there's an epidemic of rabies in their area, and then they're eating all the animals that die of rabies, now they're going to be ingesting those, the nerve tissue and the saliva that passes on the virus. And so most of them are going to come down with rabies, but there might be a handful that just naturally are immune, and they're the ones who survive, and they're the ones who have babies, and then their babies survive. That makes a lot of sense.
Dang. And I have a theory now I'd like to put it at, because I think I have enough to put it to that level. When people say that they've shot these things or hit them up really good with traumatic type damage, I've used this example and I'll use it again real quick so that you just get a gist in the audience. William could be in World War II and just hyped up, adrenaline going crazy, lighting up people, saving people. Next thing you know, we're in a safer position. We look over, William bled out. All right, well, how'd that happen? Oh my goodness, he has like 13 bullet holes in him, and his blood pressure dropped, adrenaline drops. Boom, this is what happens. Obviously, when these dogmen or cryptids or werewolves or Bigfoot are hyped up and the adrenaline's going, they just get smashed by a car, somebody lights them up, bah, 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 bah. Well, okay, when they run off or the adrenaline drops down and they get back to their lair, their den, their cave system, do they pass away?
They might.
Yes, that's one part of it. Or what about this? So hyenas, again, here's the damn spotted hyenas. Females are the dominant ones. Males are on the low totem pole. They have the shattered teeth, usually malnourished because the women run things, all right? They have seen the males, again, the weakest ones in these prides, surviving wounds that no other predator on Earth or animal in general has seen to survive from. Literally their guts hanging out, all kinds of things, and they survive from it, all right? They are so hardy, it's insane. Is it part one, the adrenaline drops, they get smoked, or is it part two, these things might be pretty hardy?
I mean, there are animals that are just tough. I mean, like sharks are known to be incredibly tough, and then take crazy wounds and then end up healing and having gnarly scars, but living for years afterwards. I used to raise quail, the little birds, and those things, they would rip the crap out of each other. And I mean, sometimes I'd find a bird that was like so bloody and beat up, and it's like scalp hanging off its head and a wing
Oh,
broken, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to put this thing down. But I'd just separate it and separate, usually abusive bird. Um, and more often than not, without any special care, without anything other than water and food, not me putting ointment on it or anything, those birds would heal up in a week or two and, barely look like they had been hurt at all. So some animals are just really tough and have, like Wolverine, like, healing powers. And, and I think resistance to infection is a big part of it too. If they're so resistant to all these diseases, maybe they've got just a phenomenal immune system and they're pretty resistant to infection too.
creepy as heck right there, and all excellent points, which is why when I try to link up with you, I try to fire away some of those interesting questions. And
Well, and as far as them like shaking off wounds, that's a thing that like when people in Alaska and the parts of the world that deal with big bears, they're taught to shoot them in either the head or the shoulder, right? Because the only way you're stopping one of those things is by breaking a significant, bone, so it's immobilized, or by stopping its central nervous system. Because if you shoot them in the body, more often than not, it's just going to make them mad. They're going to tear you up, and 10 minutes, 20 minutes later, maybe they're blood loss, but you're or terribly mauled, and so that's the thing about big tough animals is, and adrenaline is it may take a while for them to even if it's a good clean shot through the lungs or the heart or an artery or something, it may just take them a while to.
man, excellent stuff right there. And that triggered in my mind an example times two that shows you how hardy something is. First one is recently, I don't know if this bear was a nuisance or somebody had hunted it, either way, as they were inspecting its shoulder blade muscles, and it was a large brown bear. They saw something pretty interesting in there, and as they looked at it closer, it was a large hunting knife that had, healed into the bones and muscles, basically on that big hump between its back.
Yeah.
And they came to the conclusion that it was pretty much the last attempt of somebody, unfortunately, in the mouth.
Yeah, that's got a story behind it for sure.
Right? That is so absolutely creepy right there. And then there was another case. I used to like his thread more when he was covering hunting stuff. Now, I don't know. It's a little bit too woo for me, I guess. But How to Hunt.
Oh, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah. And when he first started doing his show, I really was a huge fan. But like I said, as I got over to some of the woo stuff, I'm not really too big into it now. But he had a encounter with somebody that wasn't too intelligent with him bear hunting, right? And he had told this guy, look, after you take the shot, do not make any noise for a bit, all right? And this guy was the one with the weapon because, like Steve was saying, you have to have tags and things. And, he at the time didn't have the weapon, which he said later on after this, he started making sure he was always properly prepared for this. But sure enough, you could see the hump of this huge bear. He tells him to take the shot. The guy takes the shot. Boom, it drops. As soon as it happens, the guy starts trying to whisper to him, and Steve's like, dude, what the heck? And he starts backing up as slow as he can, he says, and gets eventually to a tree, and the guy's still whispering, do go on there and check it? And all of a sudden the bear's like, whoa, and they're like, what the heck? And then finally, the guy's like, you want me to go in and get it? And Steve's like, yeah, you go in and get it, dude. So he goes in and ends up finishing it. Steve said he goes, boom, after it's done. And the guy's like, yeah, I got it. And Steve walks in. It was this huge brown bear, but that first shot, pretty much where this knife was, had hit it right there. So it dropped it, and its head was curled up, basically, so its snout was almost in its butt cheeks. And it was trying so hard still to run at them, where there was huge rips in the ground where it was still trying to run with its arms, but it couldn't move. It was that pissed off that this had just happened. And then there's other cases where people take shots at it and they end up finding the bear being unalive, where it bled out because it circled back around them and was waiting to ambush them. Like, what? You just did this to me? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of the things that, new hunters are told, is you shoot your deer or whatever you're hunting, give it 20 minutes, give it 30 minutes, just let it bleed out, because the more you move, the more it in its fight and flight and adrenaline dump is going to run, because they can run a long ways before they bleed out. And so it'll be a lot easier to find your animal if you just sit still for 20 minutes and then go and track it down, rather than, immediately go to the deer, which may just be stunned, but not, and then it detects a predator, and a threat. And so it uses its last bit of life force to run 500 yards away into the, toughest thicket of, trees that's in the area. And then you have a fun time, carrying it out. So yeah, that sounds, like pretty solid advice.
Creepy as heck. As we are starting to come to the end here, I have one more question about the Chernobyl aspect before
Sure.
I have something pretty interesting I think that you might dig, that I've been working on as a non-lethal way to help yourself against animals, cryptids, or even psycho people. But back to Chernobyl real quick. What's going to be the outcome of this, do you think? Is it going
Well,
to be finished off by all the military aspects? You think they're going to get all the animals, or is there going to be some that just go back to where they came from and cause craziness?
I mean, so Chernobyl is in Ukraine, and I believe that part of Ukraine is occupied by Russia currently, and probably will stay part of Russia. Let's be honest. No one's going to be forcing that, back anytime soon. But yeah, that'll be up to, I suppose, the Russian government. Now, as far as Chernobyl itself goes, a side note, a little off of what we're talking about, the concrete dome that was built over the reactor in the emergency back in 1984, that was only designed to last for, I believe, 30 years. Well, I was born in 1985 and I'm turning 40 this year. So 30 years has come and gone and then some. And no one, the plan was that, the world would come together and figure out a more permanent solution, but no one has. So, hopefully Russia or someone does something about that, so we don't have another nuclear disaster when the dome, collapses or whatever, and more radiation spews up into the atmosphere and, affects half of Europe and Asia. As far as the animals go, in 2016, a study was started on the wolves in Chernobyl, and it concluded, and the results came out early last year. And it's fascinating because not only are the wolves thriving, wolves in the wild live 5 to 8 years, so they're hitting that goal. They have apparently developed a cancer-resistant gene. So, like I was talking about with the other animals, they're in this toxic environment. The biggest risk of high levels of radiation is cancer. Well, the only animals that are going to survive and breed and pass on their genes are ones that just have some freak random mutation that makes it so that they get a lot less cancer. They're the ones who are going to, there are people like that too. There's a person who smokes 2 packs a day for 40 years and, never gets lung cancer. And then there's a person who runs marathon and eats super healthy and clean and prostate cancer when they're 65,
Yep.
So that's just how it is. Well, if we were to put ourselves in a situation like Chernobyl, that's probably what would happen for us too, is the people who were strongly resistant to developing cancer would survive and have, successful offspring, and those who weren't would not. And so that's what's happening with the wolves, it seems. And the other thing about the cancer thing is humans and long-lived animals are far more likely to develop cancer than animals with short lifespans. Because you think if an animal lives on average 5 to 8 years, its cells are splitting and replicating and reproducing significantly less times than an animal like us that lives for 90 or 100 years. So we just, even without high levels of radiation, we just have far more opportunities for something in that decoding and recoding process when our cells divide and split and reproduce to go wrong. And so, who knows, if these wolves are living to be 50 years old, they might have higher amounts of cancer than wolves, that weren't exposed to that radiation. It's kind of hard to tell, but apparently, at least because dogs do get cancer, I've known people whose dogs had cancer. Apparently these wolves are much less likely to have cancer than most others. So,
Jeez, that's so creepy but cool. Nature is absolutely epic, and that reminds me as well, real quick, as we do start to tie this up. Kuru, for example, I always thought that yes, it does happen to people. You get the twitches
absolutely.
and things,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it sits dormant a very long time. So
Yeah.
there's actually reasonable amounts of analytics to support that in these areas where this would have potentially been happen, or even per se feral people, would they even live long enough to see the effects of it?
Yep, that's a good question. Yeah, with the like mad cow disease, which is basically the bovine form of Kuru, or Kuru is the bovine, the human form of mad cow. It's a matter of exposure, right? So if I eat one steak from a cow that has mad cow disease, I'm probably not going to get, or I'm probably not going to show symptoms of mad cow disease the natural end of my life. But if I'm eating, 3 or 4 hamburgers a week for several years from a herd of cows that is contaminated with it, I'm exposed to myself over and over and over and over and over again. And so you build up the prion, in the case of these diseases we're discussing, in your nervous tissue. And then once again, we're talking about cells reproducing. That prion basically somehow, by some magic of biology, kind of ends up getting reproduced by our own body, and making the situation even worse. And yeah, probably within 10 years, I'd have symptoms of mad cow disease. And so, yeah, it's absolutely a matter of exposure. And a lot of, even going back to the pandemic that we had, 4 years ago, I remember people talking about viral load, that, medical professionals who were getting exposed to a lot more viral load because they were surrounded by patients who had it, oftentimes had worse cases of it than you and me, who might have just, touched a handrail that someone else touched after wiping their nose. And, I come down with a little fever and cough and some body ache for a few weeks or whatever. So yeah, a lot of things are about exposure and just the, how much of it you've been exposed to.
Jeez, excellent stuff again by Mr. White right there. But being a scientist, I expect no less. And well, on a final note right here, I do not encourage anyone to quote me fully on this, all right, yet, because it's still in the works, but I'm pretty optimistic this would do some non-lethal but very painful damage to anything, all right? If you take a super soaker and you fill it up with some good old lemon juice, right? And you put a little bit of cayenne pepper in there, all right? And
homemade pepper spray.
Yes, and a little bit of salt. That thing pumps out at a distance a nice little, and my buddy who's like 6'3", 250 or something, was saying if somebody hit him in the face with that, there's no way he's gaining his composure for a very long time, because you don't have necessarily water near you to clean your eyes out or anything. Oh, yeah. And now think of an animal that has intensified senses compared to you and I. If a bear is coming at you, right, and it opens its mouth, I hope no one's ever in this situation, and you hose a big chunk of nice old lemon juice and cayenne pepper in that thing's mouth, I promise it's not going to be a nice reaction for that thing. It's probably going to start violently vomiting. And I don't know. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because
well, I mean, you're a genius, and I've had this problem myself where I come up with a great idea that I know is a great idea, and then I look into it, and someone else has already done it because it's a good idea. So bear spray exists. So yeah, absolutely, it does work, and there's a lot of argument online. But some people say it's more effective than a firearm. Some people say firearms are more effective, and some people say you want both.
I like both.
Yeah. So Yeah, not a bad idea. If you don't have access to bear spray, it would probably do the job.
Awesome.
The interesting thing about bear spray is it's actually weaker than the like mace that people will carry on their keychains, or the police will carry as a non-lethal deterrent. Apparently the regulators are more worried about hurting the nasal tissue and eye tissue of a wild animal than they are about people. so from what I've read, like I said, the self-defense sprays that people have are actually more potent than bear spray, which when I lived in Idaho, we all thought that bear spray was like super potent. It must be like 10 times better than mace or something like that. But we were wrong.
Wow, that reminds me of Shane Michael Chris before we let you go, where he was showing some of the videos where he's getting maced in the face and they're holding him down and hitting him with electrical shield. I was like, oh man, dude, it's messed up. But to the audience, we do need to allow Mr. White to get rolling. He does have a family to attend to and other great things he must conquer. But no worries, he is a bi-weekly host. And we'll be back very soon. And you can always check out the playlist we have under William White or under, yes, the Midnight Society Science Team to catch up on what we have been putting out for excellent knowledge. But until next time, stay safe out there and be good people. And William, thanks for hanging out tonight, man.
Yeah, it's always my pleasure.
My creatures of the night, I do adore every single one of you. And thank you again for tuning in tonight. If you do enjoy my content, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Feed the algorithm.